Anybody that lives out in the country will know that if the woods go completely silent, that's generally a very good indication that there's a predator in the area. People that live out in the country will also tell you that from time to time you might hear or see something that might seem completely unexplainable, but it'll have a perfectly logical explanation. However, what happened to the boy in today's story is not only completely unexplainable, it is absolutely terrifying. But before we get to that encounter, if you've had an encounter or know a story that you'd like to have shared here on the show, please email me at the link below. If you like today's story, gently slap that like button. And if you haven't done so already, especially if you're a return viewer, hit that subscribe button. While you're at it, make sure you grab that notification bell, lock your door, so you don't miss out on any future content. Now, let's get into today's encounter. Shane was just a regular kid growing up in the 90s with his mom, his dad, and his younger brother, who was 2 years younger than him, up on his parents' 80-acre property, not too far from the northern shores of Lake Superior, up in Ontario, Canada. Shane, along with his brother growing up out of the country, they spent a lot of time out of the woods on the property. They would camp, they would build forts. Their father even made a 5-acre pond about 150 yards from the house that he stocked with trout. So they spent a lot of time fishing in this pond, and in the fall they would go hunting with their dad on the property, and all through the winters they would spend a lot of time riding snowmobiles with their mom and dad. Now, growing up in the country, they both from a very young age had a various set of responsibilities, and one of Shane's responsibilities was every week he had to take the garbage from the house up to the main gravel road located about 150 yards away. Now, Shane would typically do this early on in the evening, well before it got dark. However, from time to time he would forget and he would have to make that 150-yard walk down the driveway in the dark. So what he would always do is he would go outside, he would grab the garbage cans, him and his brother would lift them up onto a wagon, and then Shane would pull the wagon down this driveway towards that road. When he would get to the road, he would lift the garbage cans off, put them on the road, and then head back up to the house. Shane did this for years, no problems at all. However, one evening when he was 12 years old, he had forgot to bring the garbage out, and he did not realize until it was full on dark outside. It was almost 9 o'clock at night. Shane had no fear of the dark whatsoever. Growing up in the country, growing up where he did, he spent a lot of time even just playing outside of the house in the dark. So going from his house to the gravel road was no big deal for him at all. So he made his way outside, he grabbed the garbage cans, lifted them up onto that wagon, made his way down to that gravel road. As he was getting closer towards this gravel road, he noticed that the woods around him were just completely silent. Now, again, because Shane grew up in the country, he knew that when the woods went silent like that, it generally meant that there was a predator in the area. So Shane, when he heard that the sounds of the woods just completely stopped, he instantly felt himself starting to get nervous. He could feel his heart starting to beat a little bit quicker. He kind of stopped for a second, started looking around, listening into the trees, thinking that maybe it was a coyote, maybe it was a wolf, or even worse, maybe it was a bear. He stood there for a few seconds, looking into the bush, listening, did not hear anything, so he continued towards the road. When he got to the road, just like every other time, he grabbed those garbage cans, lifted them up, put them down on the road, and right when he went to grab onto the handle to head back up towards the house, he also heard this loud snap off in the bushes about 50 yards away from him towards the house. Shane instantly froze, looking in that direction. Now his heart was really pounding because the sound of this snap was so loud. It sounded like it was a fair-sized stick that broke, not just a little twig. So he instantly thought that he was dealing with a bear. He kind of stood there for a second, just looking, feeling his heart beating, not really knowing what to do, and he just ended up yelling out, "Hello?" Just in case maybe it was his dad coming down the driveway to check on him. But when he yelled out hello, he did not hear his dad yell back. Shane stood there for a few seconds, kind of trying to collect himself to gather up the courage to make his way back down that narrow drive back to the house in the dark. He took a few breaths, he grabbed onto the handle of the wagon, started a very brisk walk back up towards the house. When he was about halfway back towards the house, all of a sudden, off to his left in the woods, he heard another loud crack of a stick. At this point, Shane started screaming and he started sprinting directly back up to his house. When he got to the house, he just let go of the wagon, ran up to the front door, opened it up, ran inside. As he ran through the door, his mom and dad were already making their way towards it because they heard him screaming as he ran down the driveway. They instantly started asking him, "What's wrong?" And Shane, in a very panicked state, started to tell them that there was a bear outside, that he heard it in the bush. His dad instantly went to his room, came back with his 12-gauge shotgun. See, because it was early fall, bears were very common around their property at that time of year as they were feeding and getting ready for hibernation. And every time a bear would come near the house, Shane's dad would go outside with his shotgun. He would fire off a shot to scare him away. So Shane's dad made his way to the door, passed by Shane, went outside, pointed his shotgun up into the air, let a shot of birdshot out just to scare away this bear. His dad then turned around, came back into the house, looked right at Shane and said, "It's okay, buddy. He's gone now. He's not going to bother you." With that, Shane ended up having to get ready for bed, so he washed his face, he brushed his teeth, and then he made his way to his bedroom on the far side of the house. The layout of their house was basically just a one-story house. Through the vast majority of it, you go through the front door, you go off to the left, it was their living room, their kitchen, his parents' room. But if you turned to the right, there was a small staircase that went up just to a raised second level, where him and his brother both shared a room that had a sliding door that went out on top of their garage. So Shane and his brother made their way up to bed. Shane climbed in his bed, his brother climbed in his parents said goodnight, they headed off to their bed. And as Shane was lying there trying to fall asleep, his little brother across the room all of a sudden started to talk. He said, "Shane, I think that was the pale man." Shane was completely confused by this. He kind of turned over in his bed, looked towards his brother's bed. He could see his brother in the glow of the nightlight looking directly at him. Shane looked at his brother and said, "What's the pale man?" And his little brother said, "The man that comes to the window some nights." Shane was instantly terrified by this, but at the same time, his younger brother was 2 years younger than him, and he just kind of thought that, maybe his brother had a bad dream at one point and just imagined some pale man standing at their window. Shane told his brother, "No, the boogeyman does not exist. It was just a bear. Go to sleep." His little brother said, "No, I see the pale man at the door almost every night. He comes and he stands on top of our porch." Shane, again, was just completely confused by his younger brother's statement, and he said, "There's no such thing as a boogeyman. Go back to sleep." As Shane was trying to fall asleep, he just kept thinking about what his brother had said about this pale man and was trying to figure out what he meant by it. Eventually, though, Shane managed to drift off to sleep. The next morning, Shane woke up and he ended up talking to his younger brother and again asked him about this pale man. He just basically asked him, who is a pale man and what does he look like? His younger brother went on to tell him that the pale man was about the same height as her dad, but that he was very skinny. His arms looked weird, his legs looked weird. He had a very weird face with black eyes, with a big mouth, and he had sharp teeth. And he had very long fingers with what looked like claws on the end of them. Shane upon hearing this, was pretty scared because he was still pretty young himself, but at the same time, he kind of brushed it off as just being his younger brother's imagination. Over the next few weeks, whenever Shane would have to take that garbage out to the road, he made very sure that he did it while it was light. About a month later, now it was late fall, so it was getting dark fairly early in the evening. Shane again forgot to take the garbage out before it got dark, so he ended up right after dinner having to take the garbage out to the road. He was very nervous to do this because of that last time when he took it out in the dark, hearing those loud cracks and his brother telling him about this pale man. So he was not looking forward to walking down the driveway in the dark. He tried to convince his brother to come with him, but his little brother refused to go. His dad had not returned home from work yet, so his dad couldn't even come down the driveway with him. And his mom just basically told him, "You'll be fine. We have the yard light on. You have nothing to worry about." Shane, trying to be tough, he took a deep breath, made his way outside. He grabbed the garbage cans, he put them up onto that wagon, and he started walking up towards the main gravel road. Again, as he was about halfway, he could feel his heart rate starting to pick up. He was starting to feel really nervous just because of what had happened last time. However, he made it all the way to the gravel road with no silence in the woods. Everything seemed fine. So when he got to the gravel road, he lifted the garbage cans up, put them down on the ground, and again, right when he went to grab onto the handle of that wagon, all of a sudden, all the noises in the bush just completely stopped. Shane instantly felt his heart rate beating even harder now because he just associated that silence with what had happened to him a few weeks prior. Shane tried to catch his breath, tried to calm down, when all of a sudden, out of the corner of his eye, off to his left, right up along the bush line, he caught movement right up against the trees. Shane immediately turned, looked in that direction, and he saw this weird, pale, humanoid-like looking face kind of peeking around a tree, looking directly at him at about 30 yards. He could not quite make out a lot of the features of this thing. He just saw this white head looking around from this tree. He instantly went back to what his brother had said about this pale man, so he just left the wagon and started running as fast as he could back up to the house. The entire time, as he's running, he keeps turning around, looking behind him, expecting to see this pale man chasing him down the driveway. He ended up getting up to the house. He whipped the door open, ran inside. He was completely hysterical at this point. He was crying. He was screaming. His mom came running to the door, asking him if he was okay. And he just started blurting out that the pale man was up on the road. His mom was completely confused by this. She had no idea what he was talking about this pale man. So she started asking him questions about him the same way that Shane had asked his brother. And Shane was telling his mom about the story that his younger brother had told him about this pale man, and that he was pretty sure that he just saw him out on the road. Shane's mom was actually terrified of this, thinking that it was a drifter or somebody that was trying to break into houses along their gravel road. So she immediately locked the door. She grabbed Shane, she grabbed his brother, she ran across the house and basically locked them in her bedroom and waited until his dad got home. About an hour later, when Shane's dad was making his way down the road towards their driveway, he saw the wagon sitting right at the edge of the driveway, and he felt instantly pretty annoyed with Shane. Shane knew better not to leave the wagon, and it was something that his dad had always stressed to him every time he took the garbage out, was that he had to bring that wagon back up to the house. So Shane's dad pulled into the driveway, he stopped his truck, got out, he grabbed the wagon, put it in the box of his pickup, and headed up towards the house. When Shane's dad got to the front door, opened it up, and stepped inside, He just realized how incredibly quiet the house was. He kind of looked around, looking for his wife, looking for Shane, looking for his other son. Could not see them, so he yelled out, basically, "I'm home, where are you?" With that, Shane's mom told the boys, "Stay here, I'll be right back." She unlocked the bedroom door, headed out to go talk with Shane's dad. A few minutes later, both his mom and his dad came into the bedroom. His dad asked him, "Shane, what happened?" Shane went on to tell his dad exactly what he had told his mom, what his brother had told him about this pale man, and how he had seen this pale man out on the road, and that's why he left the wagon there. Shane's dad told him and his brother and his mom to stay in the house, and again, he grabbed the shotgun, he grabbed the flashlight, and he headed outside. The entire time his dad was outside, Shane was absolutely terrified, thinking that this pale man was going to hurt his dad. After about 20 minutes, his dad came back into the house. He told them that he searched the property from the house up to that gravel road, and he did not see anybody at all. But then he said that there was going to be a new rule, and that under no circumstance was Shane to take the garbage out to the road by himself anymore, and that his mom or his dad had to go with him, and it had to be during daylight. Over the winter and into the spring, everything was completely fine. There was no more run-ins with this pale man. However, that summer, now Shane was 13, and because it had been about 9 months since Shane had that run-in on the gravel road, the rules were starting to get a little more lax, and Shane again found himself from time to time having to take the garbage from the house out to the road by himself. He really did try to make a very conscious effort to only do it during daylight. However, that July, it was mid-July, one evening, him and his brother were playing Nintendo after supper. He kind of got caught up playing the game with his brother, and before he knew it, it was starting to get dark. Shane, at this point, started to panic, but he did not want to go to his parents and tell them that he had not taken the garbage out yet, because he did not want to get in trouble, because he knew he was supposed to do it when it was daylight. So Shane told his little brother, he said, "I'll be right back, I have to take the garbage out." And then he made his way out the front door very quietly. He tried to open the door as quiet as he could so that it wouldn't creak, he wouldn't alert his parents. He grabbed the wagon, he put those garbage cans on top of it, and very, very slowly, again, not to alert his parents, he started pulling the wagon across the gravel on the driveway. He made his way about 3/4 of the way to that gravel road, and just like that previous year, he noticed that everything was completely silent again. When he noticed that the woods were so quiet, he just jumped back again to what he'd experienced the previous year, and he just, in a full-on panic, just let go of the wagon, turned around, ran to the house, and as he whipped through the front door, the noise of him coming through the door alerted his parents. His parents came up to him and were asking him what he was doing outside. Shane told them that he had forgot to take the garbage out and that he was trying to get it to the road, and that the woods were really quiet, and that's what had happened when he heard that crack and when he had seen the pale man the summer before. Shane's dad kind of let out a sigh and said, "Shane, you know you're supposed to only do this when it's light." And Shane said, "I'm sorry, Dad, I got caught up playing with my brother." Shane's dad said, "It's okay, we're going to go take the garbage out together." So Shane and his dad made their way out of the house, down the driveway, to the wagon. The entire time, Shane's heart was beating out of his chest, just thinking about everything that had happened before. But because his dad was with him, it did make him feel a little more comfortable. When they got to the wagon, Shane's dad, too, noticed that the area was just completely silent. And Shane said to his dad, "See, Dad, it's really quiet out here." Shane's dad said, "Yeah, I noticed that. It's fine, let's just get the garbage to the curb, we'll go back in the house. Don't worry, buddy, everything's going to be fine." So they made their way to the gravel road. Both of them lifted those cans, put them on the road, grabbed the wagon, and headed back for the house. That night, after Shane had washed his face and brushed his teeth and head up to bed, his parents said goodnight. They headed back to their room just like every other night. He lied there in bed just thinking about that silence outside, thinking about that face he had seen the year before, and thinking about those stories from his brother. And he was having a very hard time falling asleep. Eventually, he did manage to fall asleep. However, about a couple of hours later, he was awoken. He could hear knocking on those sliding doors, and he heard his younger brother's voice saying, "Shane, let me in. I'm stuck outside. Shane, let me in." Shane opened his eyes, but the way he was lying, he was facing directly towards his younger brother's bed. And when he opened his eyes, he could see from the glow of their nightlight that his younger brother was in bed. Shane was immediately just completely frozen with fear. He did not want to turn around, look out those doors, and see what was standing there. So he just lied there, kind of cuddled up in his blankets, looking towards his brother, his heart racing out of his chest, while he kept listening to the tapping on the window and his brother's voice calling to him from outside. After a couple of minutes of hearing his brother's voice, all of a sudden, that voice all of a sudden turned into his mother's voice. With that, Shane was even more terrified, now wondering what was outside, how it can sound like his brother, and how it was now sounding like his mom. Completely terrified and not knowing what to do, he just grabbed his blankets, pulled them up over his head, curled up in the fetal position. He was laying there shaking with his heart just beating out of his chest, listening to whatever this was outside tap on the sliding doors and call to him in his mother's voice. After a few minutes, that tapping stopped, and then he no longer heard his mother's voice calling to him. But he was so incredibly scared, he did not want to climb out from his blankets, and he for sure did not want to look outside. He did not want to see whatever was out there. He could not fall asleep for the entire night. He just laid curled up in that fetal position under his blankets the entire night. The next morning, his brother woke up, looked at Shane, who was still wide awake, and said the pale man was here last night. He was at the window again. With that, Shane knew that whatever was outside had to have been the pale man. So him and his brother, they got up, they made their way across the house to his parents' room. They woke up his parents and they told them how the pale man was up on top of their garage tapping on their sliding doors the night before. His parents did not know what to make of that. They just thought that their sons had been watching scary movies that they should not have been watching, and that their imaginations were just running completely wild. Shane's dad said there's no way anybody was on top of the garage. There's no way for them to get up there. And there's no such thing as a boogeyman. You guys have to stop with this pale man. What Shane saw out on the road was just somebody drifting through or somebody who was trying to break into somebody's house. They're long gone. It's been over a year. You guys need to grow up and you need to just move past this childhood nonsense. Shane and his brother did not know how to respond to their dad because they knew full well what they had seen and what they'd been experiencing. So with that, they just kind of hung their heads and made their way out of their parents' room back up to their bedroom. Shane and his brother ended up talking to each other about this pale man and how that it was not fair that their parents did not believe them. And they decided that going forward, whenever one of them would go outside, the other one would go with them, and that they would never separate just in case they came across this pale man. And that at night, if one of them would hear the pale man, what they would do is that they would just turn on their bedroom lights and hopefully the light would scare him away. They ended up rigging up this system where they used fishing line, tied it to the light switch up onto a hook so that when they pulled on this fishing line, it would pull the light switch up and the lights would turn on. And for the next 3 years, they did exactly that. Whenever one of them would go outside, the other one would go with them. And they made every conscious effort possible to only take the garbage during daylight hours. And actually, over that 3 years, they never once forgot to take the garbage out while it was light outside. And at night, if they suspected that the pale man was outside, if they heard that tapping on the window, they would pull that fishing line, turn the lights on, and it did seem to work. It seemed as soon as the lights would turn on, the tapping would stop. So for the next 3 years, every single time they would suspect he was outside, that was what they would do. When Shane was 16, he ended up getting his driver's license, and he ended up getting just an old beat up car that him and his friends would go drive around in. And on this one evening in late August, he had been hanging out with his friends, and he was getting home quite late. It was about 10:30 at night. It was already dark outside. He was making his way down the gravel road. He turned into the driveway, got up towards the house, pulled up by the garage, turned his car off, and when he stepped out of his car, he was just immediately hit with this overwhelming feeling of dread, like he was being watched from something very close to him. He just felt this real heavy feeling. The air felt heavy, and everything around was just absolutely silent. Even though he had not seen anything as he drove up to the house, he just instinctively knew that whatever was causing this feeling had to be behind him. So he turned around to look in that direction, back towards the trees, and standing no more than 12 yards away from him was a 6'5", pale white, emaciated looking humanoid creature with long, twisted arms, with these long fingers with what appeared to be claws coming off the tips. It had long, skinny, kind of twisted legs. Its face bore these deep, dark, sunken eyes, and it had this really large mouth. And when Shane looked at it, it was like this mouth opened up in a grimace, and it had these long, sharp, jagged teeth. Shane immediately went into a full-on panic. He kind of jumped over the top of his car, basically ran to the front door, forced his way into the house, slammed the door, and he felt like he was going to have a panic attack. He ended up yelling out to his dad. He just yelled out, "Dad, that pale man's back." His dad, knowing now that Shane's 16 years old and that he had not brought up this pale man for the past 3 years, instantly knew that something was not right. So he grabbed his shotgun, ran towards Shane, said, "What did you see?" Shane told him exactly what he had saw, and his dad just kind of went pale. He knew that his son was not making this up at this point, because his son, again, was now 16 years old. He had matured a lot. So his dad said, "I'm going to go deal with this." He took his shotgun. He went outside. Shane went with his dad. There's no way he was going to let his dad go outside alone, even armed, up against whatever this pale man was. But when they went outside, they saw no sign of this thing at all. Shortly thereafter, his parents decided to actually sell that property, and they ended up moving about 10 miles away, still in the country, but tried to get as far away from that property as they could, with allowing Shane and his brother to still be able to go to the same schools. Over the next several years, they had no more run-ins with whatever this thing was, but it has really stuck with Shane to this day. Every time he's out in the bush, he just cannot help but think of the pale man and what he experienced growing up. Well, that's it for today's encounter. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, what you think this thing was. Was this some type of shapeshifter, something like a skinwalker? Was it something more like a Wendigo? Or was this possibly even the Rake, or some type of demonic entity? But as always, thanks for joining us. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.